Thank you very much for inviting me here today. So Bon Appetit Management Company, as Andrew mentioned, is in 31 states. We have over 400 restaurants, 500 chefs. We're a $650 million company, 10,000 employees. We serve 120 million meals a year. When I lecture at colleges, they often think that's monopoly power. But let's put this into context. Americans eat 1 billion meals a day, and half of them are not at home. They may eat them at home, but they may have bought prepared meals somewhere else. So 500 million meals prepared in a commercial kitchen every day. We do 120 a year, 120 million a year. We're very proud of that, but that's not exactly monopoly power. We can't dictate to the supply chain, you will do it and have it done. We have to work a little bit more creatively with the supply chain, redefine the supply chain to do what we would like to be there, to really follow our core philosophies, which are culinary at heart. We cook from scratch. We don't open tin cans. The history of food service, especially in college campuses, are opening tin cans and mystery meat. And that is exactly what Bon Appetit 25 years ago set out to change. And for our account, certainly that is the case. We like to think of ourselves as industry leaders in responsible practices. I'll give you some evidence of that. Others apparently think that we deserve that title as well. And truly, heart is at the flavor of everything we do. That's not a tagline. That really is who we are. Fidel Bauchio, our CEO and founder, was the person who was asked to be the keynote speaker today. Not me, but I'm okay with that. I'm happy to play the cleanup hitter when he's not able to get here first. He's won 2 awards in the last week, which is actually what kept him away from Washington, D.C. He just recently won the first ever award by the James Beard Foundation for leadership in the food industry. And that, I mean, the foundation, the Beard Foundation, has been around for a long time, well known for honoring chefs. This is the first time they have given awards to some other individuals, and included among the inaugural class were Fred Kirschenman, sort of the leader, the thought leader of the whole ag of the middle, the disappearing middle-sized farmer. And also the First Lady for her campaign against childhood obesity. And just a select few people who have been working sort of at the cutting edge of the food system. Fidel yesterday was in California receiving the Don Quixote Award. And if any of you has ever met Fidel Bauchio, somehow Don Quixote is sort of a very good image to attach to him. He is a very fiery individual. He inspires leadership among his staff by just saying, well, just don't do that crap anymore. And that's kind of the founding philosophy of this company. But he has done a lot of work in the past few years to try to change the facelessness and the namelessness of farm workers, specifically the people who harvest our food, and really sort of showing how that's a part of our food system. It's one of the many things that was mentioned this morning, but it is not a small part at all. So Fidel really is the heart of this company, and he inspires the other 10,000 of us to do what we do. I said before, we are an on-site restaurant company. These are some of our clients, just to give you a sense. Many times people say, well, is one of your competitors Cisco? And we say, no, Cisco is a supplier. It's a distributor of food. We are a restaurant company. When a client like eBay or Adidas or University of Pennsylvania or Duke hires us, what we bring to the table are executive chefs, usually culinary school trained chefs or restaurant chefs. They hire a team, and then we apply our food standards and we buy the food. So that Sodexo works here. They're another on-site restaurant company. Aramark is as well, and so is Chartwell's for higher education. We think we're a little different than those folks, though. We have a different philosophy, we have a different way of doing business, and we think we're quite effective, actually. The last 3 years, the economy has certainly not been what most people have wanted. We've been growing by 10% each of the last 3 years. We think that really speaks volumes about what our clients want. Our clients want authenticity, they want real food, they want a commitment to socially and environmentally responsible practices, and they push us to keep on doing a better and better job. But at the heart of this company, we are chef-driven. We have 23 people in our corporate office, even though we have 10,000 employees. People often say, well, how can I become part of Bon Appetit's supply chain management group? And I say, you're looking at the supply chain management group. I wish I could hire more people, but that's not the way we do things. We have the chefs be part of that system. 15 of them last year were named foragers. So the Mid-Atlantic and then also North Carolina and Virginia separately have foragers. They are chefs who specifically go out in all ways. They're members of local food committees. They go to forums. They go to farmers markets to really find those best quality food. From the beginning, our emphasis has been on great food. And the socially responsible practices have really developed when we found that we couldn't find it through normal channels. This has been an outgrowth, but the core of our company is about the flavor of the food, authentic, fresh, seasonal, and as I'll tell you more later if I get a chance, seasonal fish even. We're not accepting just global supplies of chopped up fillets that nobody really knows where they're coming from or with what conditions under which they were grown. We are an intensely passionate company, group of people, and it's a very, I've worked for a lot of different companies, and this one's just very different. Passion is very much at the heart of what we do. And I think one of the things that also makes us different is that our commitments are company-wide. What does that mean? Well, let me give you an example. How many times have you seen this on the bottom of a menu in a restaurant? We use local and sustainable ingredients whenever possible. What the heck does that mean? I would argue that's not a commitment, that's an aspiration. Perhaps it's even a lie. I know a lot of chefs try to do the right thing and they try to use messaging that really expresses how they feel. And good for them if they're really trying to do the right thing. But if you see this as a consumer, it tells you nothing. What does that mean? Maybe whenever it's cost effective or sustainable by a definition that I personally have made up, organic when I can find it. I mean, it's really not a commitment. And so when we say our commitments are company-wide, it means every chef is required to do it, and we monitor what they do by checking the purchasing reports. So when we talk about company-wide commitments, we have really pioneered a lot. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through them individually rather than through this list. So in 1998 or so, we really discovered that there was a loss of flavor on our plates. Industrialized agriculture had brought us 3 different kinds of apples. Tomatoes in winter didn't even remotely taste like tomatoes. Of course, they didn't really look like tomatoes either. And melons were mush. And that's not our idea of what good flavor is supposed to taste like. So we addressed that by developing a farm-to-fork program. This was 1999. You think about local food has really taken off in the last 3 years. In 1999, when our chefs approached farmers, they kind of said to our chefs, "What are you doing here? We're not going to sell to a cafeteria." There was a hard sell in the beginning. Now we have farmers that are coming to us over and over again, and they want to get into our kitchens because they know we're going to treat their food well. But this was not the case in 1999. So what our Farm to Fork program has been from the beginning is a program where chefs are required to purchase 20% of their foodstuffs under these regulations, if you will. And I will tell you that it's very hard to do. It actually is very hard to do. But that is the goal we set for them. Some of them exceed that number wildly. But what we're really talking about is not merely proximity. But what we're talking about is food from producers, artisan producers, whether the small farms or ranches or artisan producers that are within 150 miles of each kitchen. And that's an outer limit. We prefer a lot closer, and many of them get a lot closer. But we're also talking about small producers, $5 million a year or less in sales. And they have to be owner operated. So a subsidiary of a giant corporation that just happens to be in your backyard doesn't cut it under this program. The problem we heard a lot about this morning, so I'm not going to go through this, is the misuse of antibiotics or antimicrobials, is a better term here. It's just something that we find appalling. Fidel Bauchia was on the Pew Commission. He was a commissioner and traveled with the commissioners around the country to see animal production systems. He was absolutely horrified by what he saw. But we had already made this commitment of taking actions toward reduced antibiotics, and our minimum standard is that all hamburgers are made with fresh ground beef, no antibiotics, no added artificial hormones, vegetarian feed only, no neck or trim is allowed. This is the minimum standard. I can't announce it officially yet, so Adele, close your ears, but I think by November 1st, all of our beef is also going to be certified humane. So I'm very happy about that. Almost. Give us a preliminary kudos on that. We've been working on that one for months. But we also serve turkey and chicken raised without antibiotics as a routine food additive. And pork is, somebody told me last week, pork is like where shrimp was in 2006. Pork is so far behind. If you're not talking to the pasture-raised people, the industry is just, you know, I don't have to tell you. But we are now requiring pork producers to begin to set a baseline so we know where the minimum standards are. Problem, egg production practices. I think you're probably all familiar with battery cages, 67 square inches of cage space. It's a disaster from an animal welfare perspective. It's a disaster from a public health perspective. You know, the thing that's really been bothering us even more lately is what a horrible working condition it is. For most people who work in this industry, they are exposed to ammonia. They are exposed to all of these other really respiratory issues that are very well documented. And really, we wouldn't want to work there. Why should we blindly buy eggs from folks who have to suffer under these conditions? So in 2006, we committed to only buying shell eggs that are certified humane by the Humane Farm Animal Care Program. Very recently, we decided that we were going to choose 3 other certification programs. And the reason we did this is because to a certain degree, we are certification label neutral, or agnostic, if you will. There are some labels that really don't cut it, and they're not on our list. But those that have some very similar high baseline standards, we don't want to dictate to the producers which ones make economic sense for them. Animal Welfare Approved is a wonderful label, and it really makes an awful lot of sense for the smaller pasture producers. GAP is required by Whole Foods markets, and if that's required and a producer sells into them, we don't want to say no to them. It's just really not fair to the producers. So local doesn't cut it, and I have said no to many chefs who have asked to buy from producers that just say, oh, we're your local egg producer. Well, what can you tell us about it? Why not get certified? So that is our standard for eggs. Problem also, food systems contribution to climate change. I have two pictures there. I don't know if you can see them very well. The bleaching of the coral reefs. We are going to lose up to 70% of the species in the ocean because of acidification due to carbon dioxide, the ocean being overtaxed as a carbon sink for CO2 because of climate change. And of course, we're losing cropland in very critical places around the world. So we made a commitment in 2006. This was before An Inconvenient Truth was even publicly out there, when the American public had no idea what climate change was and didn't believe the science. Oops, maybe we're back there again. But we're sticking with our low-carbon diet program anyway, which is, we know the food system internationally is a big driver of climate change. We know that livestock takes a disproportionate amount of resources to grow. We think that livestock should be grown well and not simply in abundance. So the low-carbon diet was really about several things. The most important one, I think, was to educate our chefs, who are the choice editors of what is on the plates. By the way, that's another thing that's kind of different about us. We don't give our chefs menus, and we don't give them recipes. That's their job. That's why we hire executive chefs. That's uncommon in food service. So educating our chefs means educating those choice editors of what our students and our corporate employees are going to eat. So if they know, they can menu things that taste delicious, and people don't realize that they're actually eating less beef or less cheese. They just think it tastes delicious. And as far as we're concerned, the activists should know, should get involved, but if we have more chance of success if we actually give people food that they find really appealing, that accomplishes these same things, than trying to beat them over the head with a good message. So we radically reduced over 2 years the amount of beef that we purchased and served our guests, a third. Now we did that, I have to tell you, our goal was 25%, and I was nervous about whether we were gonna get there. I was like, I've put out these ambitious goals, I'm gonna be looking for another job soon. But our chefs actually knocked it out of the park, 33%. And now that's part of the chef's assessment program that they go through every year. How much are they serving? And it's not that we want to stop serving meat. We serve tons and tons and tons of meat and beef. But by buying less and putting a little less on the plate, we're buying better meat. And our Farm to Fork program has certainly allowed us to buy from smaller pasture-raised systems a lot more than we were doing before. Here are some of the other things we've done, but I'm going to skip over them in the interest of time. This is a highly pixelated image, but I just want to talk a little bit about the whole idea of portion size. This is our idea of meat and potatoes. Now, if the colors were really good, wouldn't that look appealing? I mean, when you think of this, of course, it looks enormous from here. It actually looks like one of those lagoons we were talking about this morning. But this is 2.5 ounces of potato topped with 3 ounces of meat. And it is never left on the plate when this is served, okay? So there's no food waste. This is entirely grass-fed and grass-finished beef on potatoes, and our guests love it. And so this is really fundamentally how we've been able to reduce our beef purchases and buy better meat. We make it look great and taste great. So, plight of the farm workers, the persistence of inhumane conditions for farm workers has been unfortunately part of this nation's history since slavery. But the really sad part about this is slavery still exists in this country. On farms in the United States, prosecutions have been successful as violations of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And nobody's been past 10th grade history to not know that that was the amendment which abolished slavery in this country. We are still practicing slavery in the fields. And this is something that we're only beginning to crack. We're nowhere near fixing this problem. So we actually were the first food service company to have an agreement with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, but trying to trace tomatoes through your supply chain in the winter is no small task. I will tell you that we're very proud of this work, but we're very much at the very beginning of this work. Now, if you notice for each of those slides, I put up a problem and I put up an action. I specifically didn't say problem and then solution, because we're really not at a stage yet where we can talk about solutions. This awareness of the food system and the challenges is really still very new. And I must say that, think about this, 150 years is what it's taken us to get to the industrial food system that we have now. These problems are not going to be fixed overnight. And this stuff is kind of hard to do, too. I mean, if I could wave my magic wand, I would get it done. And I bet we could agree on 85% of the things that we would do. However, there's no magic wand to fix this stuff. Good food costs more. And that's not only because we subsidize the wrong things, but smaller scale systems do cost more. And they should cost more, but it's going to take time for political reasons, for other reasons, for people to accept that maybe there's a new anchor in their mind, that there is a different price they should be paying for food. And that's a very hard thing to accomplish, especially in a recession. The other thing is we're not the French Laundry. You know, we have contract pricing. And so as much as I would like to put only grass-fed beef on the plates when we serve beef, we can't afford to do that. We absolutely cannot afford to do that. It's partly a supply issue. It's partly a fact that we serve a lot of people. Everybody we serve has a fixed income in one form or another. And they're not necessarily high fixed incomes. And so we can't individually single out our guests and charge more. The other, one of the things I often hear is, oh, college students are the wave of the future. And it's my guess that the college students in this audience are part of the wave of the future. But the 99% of the college students here and at every other college who's not actually here at this conference or similar conferences, their expectations of food is Fruit Loops for breakfast, a burger for lunch, and pizza for dinner every single day. And this is a real challenge for food service operators, for chefs, to get students to try other things. Their palates are uneducated when they come to school. The palates of a lot of the corporate employees that we feed are uneducated. And really the challenge for a chef is to get people to try different things that are unfamiliar. And there's nowhere more is that an issue as in fish. And then as I was talking about before, where we serve 120 million meals a year, that's not exactly controlling the supply chain. And a lot of great product is not available all over the country. So I talked about the Farm to Fork program before. You would think, we're in 31 states, we have a lot of business in California. You would think that Southern California would really be the leaders of our Farm to Fork program. In fact, they are the laggards. And why is that? Big Ag. Big Ag figured out a long time ago that there's great growing seasons 12 months out of the year in Southern California, in Texas, in parts of Georgia. It is nearly impossible to get small farmers to supply us in those places because they have been crowded out. They have been bought out over decades. So as the poor guys in Southern California are trying to get some local chicken and they just can't find any. So lessons learned, let me give you 3 things, I think, over our 12, 13 years in which we've really been trying to change the supply chain and have had some successes in a lot of places, is that we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. And yes, I meant the metaphor as a metaphor, of course. We work with suppliers of all sizes. I would love to tell you that we serve no factory farm meat, but that's an aspiration. We're not there yet. We're absolutely not there. But we need to work with those guys as well, because those guys, for the foreseeable future, are still going to be supplying most of the meat in the United States. So we could do this a couple ways. We could ignore them. It's like somebody said this morning, you know, I'm a vegetarian, I opt out of all of this. Well, we see our responsibility as a socially responsible company is to put pressure on the Tysons and the Smithfields and the Perdues and the other large producers, because that is what's affordable to most Americans these days. And if we're not there yelling at them and saying you've got to improve your practices, do you think the vegetarians of the country are really going to have an influence over them? I mean, and I want to say, I'll tell you later about how I eat, but I wear a corporate hat, and my corporate hat is to pressure the food companies that supply most of the nation to do a better job. The other part of I have three hats. The second hat is working with those mid-tier producers to say those who are doing it appreciably better than the really big companies, we want to give them credit for that. But how do we know they're doing appreciably better? They're certified. Humane Farm Animal Care, GAP, Food Alliance, those that qualify, although they're usually a little too big for animal welfare approved, take the steps necessary, compete with the big guys by appealing to what a lot of Americans who eat meat care about a lot, which is animal welfare and environmental conditions that are addressed in those standards as well. And then the third hat that I wear is bringing in the little guys and really trying to encourage them to thrive. So we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. We work with all three size producers because we can't use a magic wand, change the system overnight. We need them all to improve, and we need the little guys to thrive. I think I've made the second point over a number of times. And then the third thing I think that really is important, and this is really for all of you who are activists, no matter how you define that, is the passion part. That is a critical factor in our achieving some of the things we've already achieved, and in really making us feel like we're still in the game when things don't go right. And things don't go right often enough. And that's what keeps us in the game, is saying we can do this. We will have those incremental improvements. And let me give you an example in chicken sourcing. So we really work with those farm-to-fork suppliers. And then I want to tell you, is Carolina Fojo here yet? She was coming in a little bit later. She is one of our fellows of the Bon Appetit Management Company Foundation. She's the East Coast Fellow. Maybe some of you have met her. She visits lots of farms. And one of the things she does is extol the virtues of the animal welfare approved label and the certification process to the smaller farmers as a way to compete, perhaps even more importantly, as a way to benchmark yourself against other small producers so that you know you're doing a good job and you know how to improve. And one of the things that we have found to be one of the most heartfelt wins is when we work with a producer and they say, okay, it's important, we'll get certified, I understand, it may cost me some money, it may not cost me some money, but they learn things about their own system. We are currently working with a mid-tier chicken producer in Ohio. This is a $40 million company. By the way, we define mid-tier as having less than 1% of the sales of the industry leader. $40 million, not even close to 1%. I mean, it sounds big, right? $40 million, it's teeny compared to the big four that control almost 80% of the chicken market. So we have a farmer in, it's actually 38 Amish farms in Ohio, and they have really learned by going through the certified humane process who's doing it very well, who's doing it well and could do better, and who is really not taking care of business. So by going through the certification steps, they are improving the supply chain, helping them compete, creating a better product, and promoting animal welfare. And we feel pretty good about that because we require certification for those mid-tier guys. And then ABs, by the way, is not like A and B college students, but that's antibiotics. And so, you know, people often, we do get petitions from college students, don't buy any factory farm meat. And, you know, it's a balance that we really have to be very careful, because this has to be affordable to people, and we also think it's very important to improve the big systems in the meantime as well. So another example, I have to give you the example of seafood. In the beginning, 2002, we only bought, our commitment was to buy only green or yellow listed species from Seafood Watch. And that's a credible scientific standard that we're very proud of. But over time, as we began to learn much more about fisheries and aquaculture systems, we realized that there was a lot more change that we could affect by signaling to the market that there were other things that were important. And things that particularly like fishery or aquaculture improvement programs that World Wildlife Fund is involved with. If we say we're going to stay entirely away from red listed species, well, who's going to be there to help try to improve things? And so if they have agreed, this is very similar to the chicken situation that I just talked about, if they have agreed to take important environmental steps, we will buy from them, knowing that if they fail to keep on that path of improvement, we're going to stop buying from them. The biggest issue, though, in fish is even more an issue in fish than it is in meat, and that is we have such a narrow palate. There are thousands of delicious species in the seas, and we are not eating them. They are going for cheap. They are bycatch, being thrown back over as dead and dying fish, and that just seems like a shame to us. And in many cases, they are coming from the small fishermen we want to support anyway. So we have developed a Fish to Fork program, playing on that theme, which is really trying to bring in the underutilized, fresh and seasonal fish. We have designated chefs as piscators, because we needed to come up with a fun name, and we thought that kind of fit the bill, to really find the fishermen who could bring in these underutilized species so we don't have to just eat the same old. You know, cod is commercially extinct in many places where it used to be tremendously abundant. So what have we done? We now grow tilapia, which our chefs refer to as tofu of the sea. And that's kind of an insult to tofu as far as I'm concerned. But you know, there's really about, this is the beginning. Do we serve tofu? You bet. Do we serve tilapia? Absolutely. But this is a process. The more you introduce some new flavors, the more you encourage your guests to try other foods, they start thinking, oh, this isn't only about meat. This isn't only about vegetables. This isn't only about having 20 different kinds of apples at the DuPont Circle Farmers Market, which we should all be eating 20 different kinds of apples. It's wonderful. But, you know, there's aha moments for everybody, and we need to have aha moments for fish as well. So I don't have much time, so I am going to go past this, and let's talk a little bit about what's next. I think maybe not everybody in this room would agree, but many of us would agree that we have some real challenges in our animal husbandry system and in about agriculture. And certainly it's the belief of Bon Appetit Management Company that our systems have been taxed beyond their ethical and environmental acceptability. So how is the system going to change? You already know our belief that it's not going to change overnight. But, you know, oftentimes I come to forums and people say, well, it's the power of the consumers, or it's the power of business. And then somebody asks for a raising of hands. How many of you think it's this? How many of you think it's that? Rarely does anyone ask, what about government, except, you know, throw up their hands and say they're more likely, government's more likely to give us genetically modified fish and then not label it. But I think that's a false question. It's a false dichotomy. And I'll tell you why. So, two speakers, very important, near and dear to my heart. Eric Schlosser, who Robbie Kenner mentioned quite a bit this morning, said at a conference of ours on Friday, you can deal with it, you can confront it or deny it. It's too easy just to blame big companies. If you eat, you have a responsibility. And I think that gets to the heart, really, of what we're talking about here. Yesterday, I went to the Martin Luther King Memorial dedication, very powerful event. So I had to find a quote from Dr. King, who said, "The power is with individuals." That's my point. Almost always, the creative, dedicated minority has made the world better. I am going to argue for you that we are all choice editors, whether we are chefs, whether we are consumers, whether we are sustainability directors. We have none of those, by the way, at our company. That's a responsibility for every single one of us. Whether you are an educator, whether you are a farm producer, whatever role you have, if you are eat, we have to partner. Whether you're talking about big company, a little company, an eater, a food co-op, we are partners. It's individuals in partnership who are going to make the change. With that, I thank you.
Hi, my name is Dana Hecht. I'm a Master of Public Policy candidate here at GW. And I just had a quick question for you. You mentioned that you think that it's really important to maintain a relationship with the beef farm factory producers in order to put pressure on them. And I was wondering, what kind of pressure on a daily basis do you put on these producers? What kind of actionable steps do you take kind of on the day-to-day?
I've met with most of the big producers. We have annual meetings with those that we have contracts with, that we buy from. And they're competitive. You know, we could buy from this producer or that producer or that producer. There are 4 of them that produce chicken. There are 4 of them that produce pork. No, there are 2 of them who produce pork, 3. And then there are several that have produced beef. And the more we say to them, our standard is higher than last year. You're going to have to meet that standard. The more they kind of dance a little bit in their seat. But the kind of things that we're talking about are animal welfare and worker welfare. Most of the big chicken producers have radically improved how they kill chickens. I have been in kill rooms, and I have not been grossed out the way I expected to be. It grosses me out more to see workers working so fast to do kind of the things that are required of them, quite honestly. At the end of life, chickens in chicken houses, that's pretty gross. If any of you have an opportunity to go to a chicken house, industrial chicken house, make sure they don't take you to a chicken house where the chicks are like 10 days old, because they're really cute then, and everything's fine. It's what happens when they're 50 days old and how they can't move around. But, you know, there are differences with different animals, and that's why the standards are different. And so if you look at the comparisons of the different certification systems, it might surprise you. But chickens, broiler chickens and laying hen chickens and egg-laying hens, I should say, cattle, pork, there are different issues. And so you can't just say, for instance, GAP has 5 steps. If you're a step 3 chicken producer, that's not the same as being a step 3 pork producer. I'm kind of dancing around your question, but when we meet with these big companies, we have different asks depending on what kind of meat they're producing, because we're really taking from where they are now and trying to get them to the next level. Just signaling to get them to the next level is really important. We have a lot more asks of chicken producers, broilers, than we do for pork producers, because pork producers are way behind. So just to get pork producers to stop using antimicrobials after 65 days of life is a big, big step for them, but we're close. So we're not so much, we asked them for no more gestation crates. They kind of said yes, then they kind of stepped back. We're asking for it again, but we are specifically asking for no microbials after 65 days because there's a lot of scientific literature now saying it is absolutely unnecessary to keep these animals alive. And that's really what they're interested in, is keeping those animals alive, because if they've been feeding them for so many days, they're putting money like $2 a day into feeding these animals, and if they die later in life, they've lost a lot. That's how the chicken or the pork producers think about it. And it's a fair, you have to give it to them, right? They have to think about mortality. They have to think about what's going to yield, give even an even yield on their investment. So the bottom line is we look at where the standards are in those different industries, and we talk about where they're going and how quickly they can get there. And for some, it's about antibiotics for pork. For chicken, it's about animal welfare and about worker welfare. So it's a little bit different in each one.
Thank you.
Hi, Helene. It's good to see you. Jackie Church. I'm a freelance writer in Boston. We heard earlier today about strawberry workers having to wear hazmat suits, and it put me in mind of Barry Estabrook's Tomatoland, where the tomato workers don't have those same protections. And I know Fidel was a huge leader in making changes in the Florida tomato workers situation. Do you think there are lessons that we learned from that, which is not done yet, but an ongoing sort of struggle? Are there lessons we can learn from that that could be applied to the meat side of the food equation?
That's a really good question. I hadn't thought about that before. I do think that and this is related to a question that we had earlier today, where people are approaching good food from many different perspectives. One of the things we haven't talked about much today, but I hear whenever I give talks to corporate audiences, is that people are concerned about personal health rather than public health. I mean, it's not that they don't care about public health, it's just not top of mind for them. And other people care about the conditions of farm workers. And I think what's going to happen is that at some point it's going to converge, whether it's on websites or in forums or other, where all of these issues come together. And you can't solve one problem without solving the other problems. I mean, the whole issue of confined animal feeding operations also depends on a concentration of workers, and in this case now, in many cases, undocumented. We prefer to use the term undocumented rather than illegal because people aren't illegal, but there are people who are recruited by processing companies to work, and they are not legal citizens of the United States or even legal residents, and then they don't have the protections. And the same is true in the meat industry as in the farm, farm workers who pick our crops. I'm not hopeful that that part of the equation is going to be solved anytime too soon. I do think that people care. This is strange, but I think people care as a general rule. The surveys back me up on this. Unfortunately, they care more about the condition of animals than for people. I wish that weren't true. As much as I care very deeply about farm animals, I think the people need to be a really big part of that too. But that's what we get when we buy into an industrial system. If the system is either going to have to change over time or it's going to die. And maybe what we get are more efficient, smaller operations, and in one sense, economically less efficient, bigger operations, but more responsible ones. And we somewhere come to the middle to satisfy, the nutritional and the economic needs of 80% of the folks who can't afford what I have the privilege of affording.
Helene, thank you so much for what you've done and so much for what insight you gave us and your honesty. That was pretty amazing. Thank you.